Borderlands 4 needs to come out of the gate firing on all cylinders, but today I want to talk specifically about loot enemies and how they felt mostly disappointing in Borderlands 3 and how Gearbox can fix them for the next game. Loot enemies first appeared in Borderlands 2 via the loot midgets, chubby enemies, and then later with the addition of Ultimate Mode, tubby enemies. These included your standard loot midgets that could pop out of boxes and lockers, and chubby or tubby enemies that would spawn randomly in place of a normal version of that enemy. These enemies were always exciting in Borderlands 2 because they represented an increased chance at rare loot. For midgets, their pool matched the standard world drop pool, but they could also drop Generation 1 pearlescence, class mods, and relics. Most of the time, midgets weren't worth farming in normal and true vulnerable modes as their drop rates were pretty bad, and they couldn't drop pearls until level 51 and up. Even then, the drop rate is so low as to not really be worth the time. Likewise, chubby enemies, which again only appear in normal and true vulnerable mode, could only drop the bunny, the Whiskey Tango Foxtrot shield, or the cracked sash, which is just a fast recharging, non-unique, non-legendary shield. Oh, and they could also drop skins, so yay. In Ultimate Mode, the chubbies are renamed tubbies, like I said before, and this is where they finally start to feel like they're worth the effort. Tubbies can drop pearlescence starting at level 62, but with a very low drop rate of just 0.08%. That chance will increase with each level you go up, all the way up to level 80, where it becomes 1.67%. Tubbies are the only source for certain legendary class mods as well. They're also a good source for certain pearlescence, and this obviously makes hunting for these rare enemies absolutely worth the time and the effort. Now, Borderlands 3, on the other hand, sure, there is a bunch of rare enemies to hunt for in Borderlands 3. You got loot psychos, shiny grogs, loot jabbers, loot tinks, there's a bunch more, but they all drop the same thing, the Rhina, a launcher that consumes far too much ammo and does far too little damage to be worth it. Otherwise, loot enemies mostly just drop cash and the occasional world drop, which in Borderlands 3 doesn't mean a lot. I can kill Graveward and get world drops. I can go do a round of the Slaughter Shaft and get a ton of world drops. I can put on a Schluter and open up a chest in the Droughts and get world drops. One of the most exciting things about loot midgets in Borderlands 2 was that they could pop out from a lot of different sources, especially boxes, so there was always that element of surprise with them. On Borderlands 3, the only loot enemies that pop from boxes are the loot loaders in DLC 1, the Handsome Jackpot, and those tend to not even have drops at all. They don't even act like they're loot enemies, to be honest. You get more from the stupid slot machine mimics that, will spit out occasional legendaries. So let's break this down. Why do fans love loot enemies in Borderlands 2? Clearly, there's the surprise factor of them spawning, combined with the fact that they drop a variety of useful loot, at least in Ultimate Mode. And why are they largely disliked in Borderlands 3? Well, they all drop the exact same one weapon if they even drop it, but then they also only drop random other junk that you can get anywhere else and much easier. Some of that could have been alleviated had Borderlands 3 brought back other rarities of loot like pearlescence, but honestly, I don't think that loot enemies should drop pearls, in my opinion. Probably the best approach would be to give loot enemies each a certain item that could normally only be obtained one time elsewhere in the game. For example, in Borderlands 3, you have the Becca. You can normally only get the Becca once per character from completing the Hammerlock hunts, which are named enemies like the Crawlies and the Droughts, for example. After you've killed all of the hunt enemies, Hammerlock will mail the Becca to you, but you're stuck with whichever version he sends you, even if it has bad parts, or worse, if you get it before you hit max level. So why not make the Becca be something that loot enemies can drop? And on top of that, maybe also give loot enemies a chance to drop maybe 5 or 6 random unique mission rewards as well, since those are hard to come by again after doing the missions. So adding things like the Becca into the loot enemy drop pool would be a great start, but another awesome addition would be to make them have the same drop as, say, Titan in the Slaughter Shaft, a guaranteed chunk of iridium. Titan drops 500, but I'm thinking rare spawn should probably drop closer to 1,000 iridium, which would give you another incentive to track them down, as reroll costs to change anointments are 250 iridium per reroll in Borderlands 3, and that is way too high in my opinion, but that's another video for another time entirely. So what does a perfect loot enemy look like in Borderlands 4 then? They'll pop out of chests and containers randomly, at least the loot tank variety does. They will spawn rarely for the tubby enemy types. They'll drop rare loot that only they have, have, and they will be easier to spot compared to normal enemy types. I know in Borderlands 3, sometimes you don't even notice that you have a chubby skag until you really focus on it. So having them really look different than the other enemies would be huge. Now on that last point, I think that's one place where Borderlands 3 mostly nailed it. Like, you have the loot tinks, amber lamps, loot jabbers, all of those things, they really stand out from other enemies because they are usually running away from you, for one, and the other thing is a lot of them have like a purple glow to them, which makes them stand out from other enemies as well. But one thing I hate about them is that they do run away from you, and some of them will escape via teleporting or digging a hole and jumping in it and things like that, keeping you from getting their loot. Maybe that's a fair trade-off. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Also, let me know what your perfect loot enemy looks like in Borderlands 4, what they should drop, how rare they should be, how rare their drops should be, should they have pearls? Let me know. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, hit subscribe for more Borderlands content, and tap the bell so you're notified when I post a new one. Check out some of these other videos on the screen right now. Thank you guys for watching. Take care.